He grabbed my wrist in front of the whole court. The fabric tore and my scars flashed like fire under moonlight. Gasps, then silence. Even the wind held its breath. I could feel his eyes crawling over every line they carved into me. My heartbeat was louder than the growl rising in his throat. 10 years I hid what they did, and now he wanted to see? Let him look, because the next mark will be his. Chapter 1. The day he pointed to my covered wrists, I wore long sleeves every season. Even in the spring, when the younger wolves ran barefoot across the riverbanks and tied flowers into their hair, I kept my arms covered. Loose linen in the summer, heavy wool in the winter. It didn't matter if the pack laughed at me, said I was strange, said I didn't smell right. They didn't know what was underneath, and I planned to keep it that way. The scars weren't just from the accident, they were from the silence that followed. 10 years had passed since that night, and no one had dared ask why I wore sleeves that reached my knuckles, or why I flinched when someone walked too close behind me. That was the one thing I'd learned well in this pack. Stay quiet, keep your head down, and maybe they'll forget you're still here. But then he came back. The Alpha King. He hadn't been home since the old Alpha, his father, died. I remember watching him leave all those years ago, tall and distant, his shoulders stiff with anger. He never looked at anyone back then, either. Especially not me. I was just the strange, quiet girl who cleaned the elder's tent and spoke only when asked. He was already promised to someone else, I'd heard. A strong Luna. A perfect match. So when the horn sounded and his shadow crossed the courtyard again, I kept my head down like I always did. I swept the steps like they asked me to, careful to keep my sleeves pulled low as I bent over the stone. That's when I felt it. Stillness, the kind of stillness that makes birds stop chirping and dogs lift their heads. The broom stilled in my hand. I looked up, and he was staring at me. At first I thought maybe someone stood behind me, but when I glanced over my shoulder, no one was there. Just the stone steps, and the dust, and me. His eyes didn't move. He walked closer. I straightened, my heart beat too fast. My hands fumbled with the broom handle, and I tried to step back without looking clumsy, but my heel caught the edge of the stair. He caught me before I fell. His hand wrapped around my arm firm, but not rough, and I gasped. Not because of the touch, but because his thumb brushed the edge of my sleeve.
You have my word.
My skin prickled.
Heat
surged through me. He let go the moment I was steady again, but the place he'd touched felt like it glowed. I whispered, "Thank you." It was barely a sound. Maybe he didn't hear it. Maybe he did. Then his voice, low and steady, cut through the quiet. "Why do you always wear sleeves?" I froze.
I know.
No one had ever asked me that.
I just needed
Not
time.
once. Not in 10 years. They whispered things, yes, called me a curse. Said the moon turned her face from me. But no one had ever looked at me and asked why. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My mouth went dry. My fingers curled tightly around the broom. He didn't step away. Instead, he reached forward slowly, not like someone trying to force something, but like someone waiting for permission. His hand hovered near my wrist.
Neither did I.
Just near it. "May I?" he asked. The courtyard was quiet. I could feel the eyes from the balconies, from the open windows above, from the guards at the gate. I felt small and big all at once, like the world had shrunk to this moment, and everyone was watching. I should have said no, but I didn't. I nodded. His fingers found the cuff of my sleeve. Gently, he pulled it back. The scars weren't beautiful. They weren't neat. Pale ridges, long and raised. Some older, some newer. They told a story no one had listened to. He looked at them, not with disgust, not with pity. Just quiet. "I remember," he said softly, more to himself than to me. I looked up at him, confused. He didn't explain. He let go of my wrist and rolled the sleeve gently back down,
Where are you
careful
going?
like it mattered to him that I be covered again.
I'm sorry, I must.
Then he turned and walked away. That was
Don't go.
all.
Don't
No
go.
mockery, no commands. Just that question and that touch. But I couldn't sleep that night. I kept replaying the moment in my mind. The way his voice sounded. The warmth of his hand. The way he looked at my scars like they weren't shameful. I sat by the small window in my room, blanket wrapped around my shoulders, listening to the wind stir through the trees. I held my wrist in my lap, the one he had touched. No one had ever asked. No one had ever seen me. Not like that. Why now? Why him? I didn't know what it meant. I didn't know what he wanted. But something had shifted. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a ghost in my own body. For the first time in years, I felt seen. Chapter 2. I was not allowed to heal in public. I didn't sleep that night. My wrist still felt warm where he'd touched it, even though hours had passed. I sat by the window with my knees pulled up, the blanket wrapped around me like a shield. The courtyard below was quiet now, only the soft rustle of leaves and the creak of distant gates. But inside me, it wasn't quiet at all. No one had ever asked about my sleeves. No one had ever looked at my scars like they weren't something to be ashamed of. No one had ever spoken to me with that kind of gentleness. And certainly not the Alpha King. I thought it was over. Just a moment. Maybe a mistake, something I should forget. But in the morning, I felt the weight of it still clinging to my chest. I moved slowly through my chores that day, careful to avoid the courtyard. My scarf was wrapped tighter than usual, sleeves pulled low. I kept my eyes down as I carried fresh linens to the elders' hall. I didn't want to see him again. I didn't want to not see him again. I didn't know what I wanted. The sun was soft that morning, filtering through the windows in gold streaks. I had just finished laying out the teacups when I heard the doors open behind me. A quiet hush followed like the air itself held its breath. I turned, hands stilling on the tray. It was him. He didn't speak right away. He stepped into the room as if he belonged there, like he had every right to be in that quiet space, meant for the old and forgotten. And maybe he did. He was the Alpha King. But when he looked at me, he didn't wear a crown. He looked tired. Not in the way of someone who hadn't slept, but someone who had carried too much for too long. His eyes weren't cruel. They weren't soft, either, just steady. "I didn't mean to embarrass you yesterday," he said. My voice caught before it could rise. I stared at him for a long moment before forcing words out. "You didn't." He took another step forward. I took one back. Not because I was afraid, not exactly, but because I didn't understand why he was here. "You're the girl who helped during the fires last spring, aren't you?" he asked. I blinked. Yes. But I wasn't supposed to. They told me not to interfere. I know. His tone lowered. They said it wasn't your place. I nodded. It wasn't my place to step forward when someone was bleeding. It wasn't my place to speak over a ranked wolf. It wasn't my place to show what I could do with my hands, how they could stop a fever, how they could soothe a burn. I was not allowed to heal in public. "You shouldn't have been punished for that," he added. I looked down, gripping the edge of the tray too tightly. "They said I made the healers look weak." He exhaled slowly. "You didn't." We stood in silence, the kind that felt full, not empty. His eyes stayed on me, but not in the way others looked, searching for fault, ready to dismiss. I wanted to ask why he remembered me. Why he, of all people, was standing in a room full of chipped teacups and dusty windows, talking to a girl most had forgotten existed. But I couldn't. He stepped closer. "What's your name?" I hesitated. "Mira," he said it softly. "Mira, no one said my name like that, like it meant something." I swallowed. "Why are you here?" He didn't smile, but his voice warmed just a little. "Because I remember pain when I see it." That made me pause. His eyes dropped briefly to my wrist. then back to my face. "You shouldn't have to hide what you survived," he said. My throat tightened. "I'm not strong like the others. You're stronger." The words hit something in me that had been locked away for a long time. I didn't even know I needed to hear them until I did. We stood there, not speaking. And then slowly, gently, he reached toward the teacup nearest him and placed it into the center of the tray I still held. His fingers brushed mine. I didn't pull away. His hand was warm. Solid, real. It wasn't a romantic gesture. It wasn't a grand moment. But something in that small, quiet touch made my chest ache. "Thank you," I whispered. His eyes searched mine. "You're welcome." He turned then, walking out of the room without another word. I stood frozen in place, the tray still in my hands, my fingers still tingling. He didn't reject me. He didn't laugh at my scars. He didn't pretend to see me. I wasn't sure what it meant, or if it meant anything at all, but it stayed with me for the rest of the day. Through the rest of the chores, through the whispers of the others who noticed him looking my way again during the evening rounds. Through the cold supper I ate alone near the back of the kitchens. That night, as I sat again by the window, I held my wrist in my hands. He remembered me. He said my name. And the look in his eyes when he saw my scars. It didn't feel like pity. It felt like something was waking up. In him. In me. Why would someone like him look twice at someone like me? Chapter 3. The new Luna laughed when I flinched. The warmth of his voice still echoed in my mind when I walked into the gathering hall that evening. He'd said my name. Mira. He'd remembered the fires. The healing. He'd looked at my scars and didn't flinch. I wasn't sure what it meant, but it stayed with me, like a quiet light in a place that had only known shadows. I moved more slowly than usual, careful not to draw attention. The hall was already full. The pack gathered for the moon rites. Every month we came together beneath the open roof and listened to the elders speak, to the new wolves take their vows. It was tradition. Tonight was different, though. Tonight, the Alpha King stood at the front of the hall. And beside him was she. The new Luna. She was beautiful, in the way women like me could never be. Tall, sharp-featured, dressed in silver and deep red. Her hair was pinned high with gold clips, her shoulders bare, her posture like marble. She stood so close to him, I wondered if the bond had already been sealed. I took a seat near the back. That was where I belonged. I always chose the edge of the stone bench, behind one of the worn pillars. From there, I could see him, but he wouldn't see me. Still, he did. His eyes searched the room briefly, just once, and when they passed over the crowd, they landed for a single moment on me. My heart stopped, then stuttered, then kept going. He didn't smile. He didn't frown either, but his eyes softened, just a little, like he was remembering something no one else knew. The elder began the ceremony. Words were spoken about unity, about the bond between Pack and Alpha, about strength and moonlight. I listened, but I didn't really hear. My thoughts kept drifting to his hand near mine, to the quiet way he'd said, "You're stronger." But it didn't last. Because halfway through the rites, the new Luna stepped forward to light the ceremonial flame. A small gesture, but symbolic. The flame meant healing, renewal, protection, the hearth of the pack. She took the torch from the elder, held it high, and turned facing the crowd. Her eyes landed on me. I felt it. Like a spark in a dry field. She whispered something to the girl beside her. The girl laughed. Others did too. I looked down quickly, ashamed without knowing why. And then she spoke. "Shouldn't the healer be up front?" She said, loud enough for the nearest rows to hear. Or does she only show her gift when no one's looking? The chuckles grew louder. My face burned. I stood, meaning to slip away, but I dropped the basket I'd been holding, the one with the flower petals for the offering. It tipped, and the petals spilled in every direction. Red, white, and pale blue were scattered at my feet. The hall fell into an uncomfortable silence. I bent quickly to gather them, heart racing. That's when she laughed. The new Luna's laugh was soft, like bells. Pretty, but cold. It slid beneath the skin. "Oh," she said with mock concern. "Did she flinch?" I thought healers were brave. I froze. Her words weren't cruel in tone, but everyone knew what they meant. And worse, everyone saw me flinch. They saw me bend down. They saw me small. I gathered the last of the petals with trembling hands. I didn't look up. I just turned, basket clutched tight, and walked toward the back exit, breath shallow, eyes burning. I heard no one followed. Not until I reached the hallway. "Mira," his voice. I stopped. He was alone. His shoulders filled the narrow hall, the torchlight catching on his collar. He didn't look angry, just quiet. I couldn't speak. "She shouldn't have said that," he said. I shook my head. "She's your Luna. She can say what she wants." He took a step closer. "She's not my Luna. Not yet." That surprised me. I looked up, just slightly. He saw the tear I hadn't wiped away. And something changed in his face. A shift like he wasn't just the Alpha King anymore. "You flinched because you've been hurt," he said gently. "That doesn't make you weak." I swallowed hard. Everyone saw it. Let them. His voice had a steady calm. He didn't reach for me, but I felt the weight of his presence strong, grounded. "I'm not like her," I said quietly. "I don't speak the right way. I don't look the right way. I don't belong in front of the fire." He looked at me for a long time before speaking. "You belonged there more than anyone tonight." I didn't know how to believe that. But I wanted to. He nodded toward my hands. "You dropped the petals." I looked down. The petals were still crumpled in the basket, some of them wilted from being stepped on. Without a word, he crouched slightly and took one of the red ones from the edge. Then he walked to the small offering bowl near the wall, where the fire from the ceremony still burned, and gently placed the single petal into the flame. It hissed softly and curled into ash. He looked back at me. "Now the offering is complete." My throat tightened. I said nothing. He nodded once, then turned to go. But just before he reached the archway, he paused. "I see you, Mira," he said without turning around. "Even when you're trying not to be seen." And then he left. I stood there in the empty hall, the scent of ash and petals still in the air. My fingers brushing the rim of the basket. For a long time I didn't move. Then I whispered to myself, "He's not like the others." Chapter 4. He called me brave, then left me bleeding. I carried his words with me like they were something precious. "I see you, Mira, even when you're trying not to be seen." No one had ever spoken to me that way. Not with kindness, not with truth. Not with eyes that didn't flinch when they looked at me. I wanted to hold on to the feeling of being noticed, of being something other than a shadow, but feelings, I'd learned, don't last long in this place. The next morning, I went about my chores quietly. The whispers from the Luna's laughter still echoed through the pack, but no one dared say anything to my face. Still, I felt the weight of their glances. I kept my sleeves long. I tucked my hair behind my ears to keep it neat. I stayed quiet. By mid-morning, one of the elders asked me to deliver herbs to the infirmary, a place I hadn't been allowed to step into since the incident last year. I wasn't licensed, they said. I wasn't trained properly. But when the fever had spread last spring, it was my hands that calmed the shaking. My touch that broke the heat. I walked carefully down the stone path toward the healer's hall. The basket held close to my chest. He was there, alone, standing near one of the long tables, sleeves rolled to his elbows, hands resting on the edge like he had something heavy to carry, but nowhere to set it down. He looked up when I entered. I stopped at the doorway. "Elder Toma asked me to bring these." He nodded once. "Come in." His voice was steady, but his eyes held something else attention. Not anger, not coldness, just something heavy. I stepped inside and placed the basket near the shelves. He walked toward me slowly. You know what these herbs are for? I nodded. For pain. And swelling. You've used them before? I nodded again. Yes, many times. He studied me. They say you weren't trained. I looked down. No one offered to teach me. I learned by watching, by trying. He was silent for a moment, then said softly, You did more than try. You saved lives. His words caught me off guard. I looked up, unsure what to say. His gaze held mine. That takes courage. My chest tightened. I didn't feel brave, I just didn't want them to die. Sometimes, that's what bravery is. My breath shook a little. Then he stepped closer, just a foot away now. He reached out slowly, like before, and gently took my hand. His palm was warm. His thumb rested lightly against the back of mine. He didn't grip, he didn't pull, just held it. You matter more than they've ever let you believe, he said. My throat tightened again. I blinked back, something rising in my eyes. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't quite joy either. It was something in between, a yearning that had no name. Why are you saying this? I whispered. His thumb moved gently, just once. Because it's true. The moment felt like it could last forever. But it didn't. A knock came at the door. Sharp, loud, he let go of my hand. The Luna stepped inside. Her heels clicked on the stone floor. She didn't look at me. Your presence is needed at the High Council meeting, she said, eyes only on him. He straightened. His shoulders went cold again, just like that. The warmth from before vanished, as if it hadn't happened at all. He didn't look at me again. He turned and followed her out the door. And I stood there, alone, with a basket of herbs and a hand that no longer felt warm. He called me brave, then left me bleeding. Not from a wound, not from anything visible. But the pain was real. It wasn't his words that hurt. It was the silence that followed. It was the way he let go. I sat on the small bench near the window, staring at the empty doorway. I tried to steady my breathing, but the sting in my chest wouldn't ease. Maybe I was foolish to think he saw me. Maybe I was still just the girl in the corner, the one who helped, the one who watched, the one who never got to stay. I pressed my hand against my chest, right where the bond should have been felt if it existed. There was nothing. No warmth, no pull. Just silence. I gathered the herbs, put the basket back together, and walked out of the healer's hall without saying a word. No one noticed. Back in my room, I sat by the small window again. The sky had turned gray. I rested my hand in my lap, the one he had held, and traced where his thumb had touched. It had felt real. But now? Now it felt like a dream. Still, somewhere deep inside, even as I blinked away the ache, I couldn't forget the way he'd looked at me. Like I wasn't invisible. And that was what hurt the most. Chapter 5. I followed the rogue who knew my real name. I kept replaying his words in my mind. You matter more than they've ever let you believe. But the memory of him letting go, walking away with the Luna at his side, cut deeper than any scar. He had called me brave, then left me standing there, trembling, as if I were nothing again. The ache in my chest refused to fade, no matter how tightly I wrapped my shawl around me. That night, I went out to the edge of the forest to fetch water. The courtyard was loud with feasting, but the trees gave me quiet. I needed quiet. My thoughts tangled until I could barely breathe. The bucket was heavy when I lifted it, and the path was dim. I bent low, trying not to slip on the wet stones. That was when I heard it. A voice. Mira, I froze. It wasn't the Alpha King. It came from the shadows beneath the birches. Low, rough, a whisper, yet sharp enough to make the hair on my arms rise. I turned, clutching the bucket to my chest like a shield. A man stepped forward, not dressed like the others. His cloak was torn, his boots muddied. His scent wasn't of this pack. It was wild. Untamed, he was a rogue. My breath caught. Rogues were not allowed near the gates. They were banished wolves, cast out, dangerous, yet here he was, standing only a few paces away. "You shouldn't be here," I whispered. His lips curved, not into a smile, but something knowing. "Neither should you." My heart raced. "I live here." "No," he said softly. His eyes, dark and steady, pinned me in place. "You survive here. That's different." I gripped the bucket tighter. "Go. If they see you, they won't." He stepped closer, his cloak brushing the leaves. "I came for you." I shook my head. "Why?" He tilted his head, studying me as he could see straight through the fabric I used to hide myself. "Because I know your real name." I stumbled back. "You, what?" His voice was low, certain, not Mira. "That's the name they gave you when they wanted you small. But it isn't the one your mother whispered when she held you. I know the name they buried." My knees weakened. The bucket slipped from my hands, spilling water across the stones. My lips parted, but no words came. No one alive remembered that name. Not even I had spoken it since childhood. I had buried it, as they told me to. How my voice cracked. "How do you know?" He crouched, picked up the bucket and set it upright again with surprising care. "Because I was there. The night they cursed you." My chest tightened. "No. That was long ago." His gaze didn't waver. "I remember the fire, the snow. I remember your mother's cry. And I remember the mark they tried to burn away." My sleeve felt heavy against my wrist. My scars throbbed as if they knew he spoke truth. Tears stung my eyes. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because he will never protect you," the rogue said, voice rough. "The Alpha King will use you when it suits him, then leave you bleeding again. But me," he paused, his jaw tightening. "I will not lie to you. I know who you are, and I will not forget it." I shook my head, desperate to breathe. I can't listen to this." But I did, because the truth of his words pressed against every wound I had tried to hide. "I can prove it," he said. "Come with me." Fear rushed through me. My mind screamed to run back to the safety of stone walls and watchful guards. But my heart needed to know. And so I followed. The forest swallowed us quickly. The torches of the courtyard faded behind, until only the moon lit the path. His stride was sure, unhurried, like he knew every root and stone. I kept close, though every step filled me with dread. Finally, we stopped near an old well, half buried in moss. He touched the rim. "Here, this is where they brought you." "Do you remember?" My breath caught. Images flashed, half memory, half nightmare. Cold air. Shouts, a woman's hand is gripping mine. Firelight, the smell of smoke. And crying my crying. I swayed. "How could you know this?" He leaned closer. "Because I carried you out when they left you here." The world tilted. "That can't be true." "It is," he said simply. "Look." He reached into his cloak and pulled something out. A small ribbon, frayed, faded pale blue. My throat closed. I knew it. I had worn it in my hair as a child. I pressed a trembling hand to my mouth. "Your name," he whispered, "is not Mira." Tears spilled down my cheeks. I didn't know whether to believe him. I didn't know whether to run. But I couldn't look away. His eyes softened just slightly. "I kept it because I knew one day you'd need to remember who you were." The forest was silent around us, but inside me, everything roared. Fear, hope, pain. I pulled back, shaking my head. "Even if this is true, what do you want from me?" He looked at me for a long time, then said, "Nothing. Only that you stop pretending you're invisible. You are more than what they let you be." I stared at him, unable to breathe. And for the first time in years, I whispered the question that had always burned in me. If they knew everything, if he knew everything, Would he still care? The rogue's eyes darkened. No, he would turn away. Because kings need perfect lunas, not cursed ones. His words cut deep. But beneath the pain was something else. A truth I had been too afraid to face. I stood there, trembling, the ribbon clutched in my hand. The Alpha King had called me brave. But this man, this rogue, had called me something else. I turned back toward the path. My chest was heavy, but my steps were certain. Because now, I needed to know what was real and who would stand by me when the truth came out. And in the quiet of my heart, I asked myself once more, would he still care if he knew everything? Chapter 6. The witch said my scars held the prophecy I didn't sleep that night. The rogue's words spun around in my chest like wind caught in a hollow room. That's not your real name. And the ribbon, pale blue and frayed, now rested beneath my pillow like something sacred. I had spent years pretending none of it mattered. Those scars were just scars. Those names didn't change anything. But the truth had been quietly waiting, like a locked door behind everything I did. Now it had cracked open. I needed answers. Real ones. Not from the pack. Not from the Alpha King. I needed someone who didn't belong to anyone. So I went to the hills. They called her the Bone Witch. She lived beyond the old border where the forest thinned and the stones turned red. Most said she was mad. Some said she had once been a Luna who lost her child and forgot how to speak to wolves. But all said the same thing: if she touched your skin, she could see what others refused to. I wrapped my shawl tightly and walked the crooked path just after sunrise. The frost still clung to the grass, and my breath clouded the air as I climbed the last hill. Her hut stood crooked against a tree with no leaves, even in spring. I hesitated before knocking. She opened the door before I could. Her eyes were sharp. Not cruel, just old and tired of lies. "I've been waiting," she said. I swallowed. "For me?" She nodded once. "You've carried silence too long." "Come." Her voice didn't leave room for questions. I stepped inside. The air smelled like herbs and smoke. Dried things hung from the rafters. In the center of the room, a fire burned low in a stone pit. She motioned for me to sit. I sat. Her gaze moved slowly over me, and I fought the urge to hide my arms beneath my shawl. She held out her hand. "Let me see." I hesitated. Then, slowly, I pushed back the fabric. My skin prickled as the cool air touched the ridges of my scars. She took my wrist in both hands. Her fingers were warm, soft, calloused. She didn't flinch. She didn't stare. She just closed her eyes. The room felt still. Too still. Then she opened them. "What they tried to erase," she said quietly, "wasn't a mistake." I stared at her. "What do you mean?" She turned my arm gently, tracing one of the deeper lines. "These marks, they match the old signs. Carvings from before the split. Before the throne turned cold." I didn't understand. They said it was a curse, that my birth killed my mother. The witch looked at me carefully. "It wasn't a curse. It was a sign. You were born under the red moon." I frowned. "That only happens once every 100 years. She nodded. "And each time, a child is born who carries what the pack has forgotten: truth, balance, and the old bond." I shook my head, heart pounding. "No, I'm not important. I was left at a well." "The Alpha King barely looks at me. You were hidden," she said gently, "because the prophecy said your blood could break the bond of the throne. And the Luna who sits beside him? She comes from those who feared that." I stared at the fire, struggling to breathe. "So they tried to erase me." She touched my face tenderly. "But your body remembered. That's why you heal. Why are your hands calm when others can't?" Tears slipped from my eyes before I could stop them. "But I'm nothing to them." "You're everything they fear," she whispered. I blinked through the tears. "Does he know?" She pulled back, her voice softer now. "The Alpha King is bound by duty, not truth, not yet." I touched the scar across my forearm. And if he knew I carried the old bond? Her gaze met mine. He would have to choose between power and prophecy. Silence stretched between us. I thought of his hand brushing mine, his voice saying, "You matter." I thought of how quickly he left me standing alone. Will he choose me? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She didn't answer. Instead, she reached behind her and pulled out a small cloth pouch. She pressed it into my hand. "Take this. When your scars burn again, open it. It will remind you who you are." I stared at the pouch. It was light, almost empty. "What's inside?" She smiled faintly. "The truth, but only when you're ready." I left just before noon, walking slowly down the hill with the pouch tucked into my shawl. The wind picked up. My sleeves flapped as I walked. I didn't pull them back down. For once, I let my scars breathe. When I reached the edge of the forest, I saw someone waiting. Him, the Alpha King. He was leaning against the tree, arms crossed, eyes unreadable. I stopped, heart hammering. "You left the grounds," he said. "I needed answers," I replied. His gaze dropped to my exposed wrist. "From the Bone Witch?" "Yes." Silence then, softly. "What did she say?" I swallowed. "She said my scars are not just marks. They mean something." His eyes lifted to mine. "Do you believe her?" I nodded. "I have to." He stepped closer. "And what do you believe they mean?" My voice shook, but I held steady. That I wasn't born to be quiet. That maybe I wasn't a mistake after all. His jaw tightened, but his voice was gentle. "I never thought you were." I blinked back sudden tears. "Then why do you keep walking away?" He didn't answer. Instead, he looked down at my arm, reached out, and gently touched the line that ran down my forearm. "You asked me once if I'd still care," he said quietly. "Even if I knew everything." My breath caught. He looked into my eyes. "I don't know everything. But I want to." And for the first time, I let him see me. Really see. Not the silent girl. Not the cursed one. Not the servant. Just me. And he didn't look away. Not even once. I stood still beneath the trees, my scars bare, the wind cold against my skin. And I thought maybe I'm not invisible anymore. Chapter 7. I walked back into the fire they made for me. The sun was setting by the time I returned to the edge of the pack grounds. The light stretched long and gold across the clearing, casting everything in a soft glow that didn't match the ache building in my chest. I had stood in the trees for a long while after speaking with the Alpha King. His fingers had brushed my scar not in pity, not in fear, but in something quieter, something close to care. His words still echoed in my mind. "I want to know everything." And part of me wanted to believe he meant it. But another part, the part that had learned long ago to expect the fire, warned me not to step forward too fast. Not to hope too deeply. Still, I crossed the clearing, eyes lowered. I didn't want attention. I didn't want whispers. I just wanted to be left alone. The courtyard was full when I reached it. The pack had gathered again. I hadn't heard the horn, but I recognized the sound of tense silence. No music, no laughter. Just footsteps, murmurs, eyes moving like shadows. I should have turned back. But I didn't. Something in me, the part the witch had touched, refused to shrink this time. I stepped into the crowd. Heads turned. Conversations quieted. And then I saw her. The Luna. She stood near the center of the circle, draped in silver and crimson again, her hand resting lightly on the shoulder of a younger she-wolf. The girl stood trembling, barefoot and pale, her hair hanging loose around her face. She was being judged. I knew that stance. I had stood like that once. Too many times. My chest ached. An elder was speaking, his voice firm, old, used to being listened to. "Will not be tolerated. Wolves who practice unsanctioned healing risk the purity of the bond. This is law." The girl's lips parted, but no words came out. The Luna smiled softly, She meant no harm, of course, but rules are rules. My hands clenched. She tried to help a pup, someone whispered behind me. A simple fever. That's all. She's not licensed, another muttered. I stepped forward. I didn't think, I just moved. The elder noticed me first. Mira, his tone made it sound like a warning. But I kept walking. Slowly, steady, she did what I would have done, I said quietly, stopping beside the girl. The Luna arched an eyebrow. And what makes you think that helps your case? I met her gaze for the first time in days. I know what it feels like to be told your hands don't belong. To be told to stand back while others suffer. The Luna's voice was light. And yet here you are, still standing. I nodded, because someone once stood for me. And now I'm doing the same. A silence fell. I turned to the elder. She didn't break the bond, she honored it. The true bond, the one that protects the weak, that heals the broken. He frowned. You are not qualified to speak of the bond. I raised my sleeve slowly. Gasps echoed. The scars were visible now. All of them. Pale and raised. No longer hidden. I didn't mark myself. They did. Because I was born under the red moon. Because they feared what I might be. The Luna took a step forward. That story again, but the Alpha King's voice cut through the noise. Let her speak. He had stepped into the circle. Quietly, without ceremony. But his voice carried. I turned to face him, unsure if my legs would hold. He looked at the crowd, then at me. And then, softly, to the girl beside me. You tried to help a child? He asked her. She nodded, trembling. He looked to the elder. Was the child harmed? The elder looked uncomfortable. No, but then we are not punishing kindness today. The Luna's mouth tightened. You undermine tradition. I correct cruelty, he replied. Then, his eyes met mine again. And he said, not loudly but with enough strength that every ear could hear, Mira stood in the fire once. And now she's walking back into it, not to burn, but to pull someone else out. I blinked hard, the air around me too full. He stepped closer, slow and steady, until he stood beside me. And then in front of everyone he reached out and touched my arm again. Not to comfort. Not to claim. Just to say, I see you. I want the healers retrained, he said to the elders. Include those who've been overlooked. The elder shifted. That will require rewriting, then start rewriting. Silence followed. No one protested, not out loud. The girl beside me sagged with relief. I squeezed her shoulder gently. When the crowd began to drift, I stepped back. The Alpha King followed. You didn't have to do that, he said quietly. I did, I replied. Because no one did it for me. He studied me. You were shaking. I was, but you didn't stop. I smiled faintly. I've been through worse. He was quiet, then asked softly, and do you still think I'll walk away again? I looked at him. Really looked. Then I shook my head. I think you'll stay. For now. And it was enough. For the first time I had stepped into the fire. And I didn't come out smaller. I came out seen. Chapter 8. The Luna's dress burned as she touched my past. I didn't expect peace to last, not after I stood in the center of the pack and revealed everything they once forced me to hide. But I didn't expect Luna's silence, either. For 3 days, she said nothing. Not to me. Not about me. That silence was louder than anything else. The Alpha King had stood by me. In front of them all. He had touched my scars and called for change. But the Luna had not stepped back. She waited. She watched. And on the 4th morning, she struck. It was supposed to be a gathering for the Elders' Moon Feast, nothing formal, just a midday blessing. I had come to place the ceremonial cloth over the table, as I'd done for years. I had brought the same white linen with the gold embroidery, the one stitched by healer women long gone. I smoothed it gently and lit the small ceremonial flame near the corner of the altar. That's when I felt her behind me. The Luna didn't announce herself. She never did. But the scent of her perfume sweetened ash and dark flowers wrapped around me like warning smoke. I wondered, she said quietly, how long you'd hide behind your little scars. I turned slowly. She was dressed in something new again, as always. This time, a long silver dress with deep red lining, like she wanted to remind us all she bled royal. I said nothing. She took a step closer. You think you've earned something just because the alpha pities you? No. I answered softly. I don't want pity. Then why show those marks? She asked. Her voice was still calm, but her mouth curled just slightly. Why parade your suffering? They're not for show, I replied. They're part of who I am. Her eyes flickered with something anger, maybe, or jealousy. It was hard to tell. She lifted one gloved hand and reached toward the small cloth pouch tied around my waist, the one the Bone Witch had given me. Let me see it, she said. I took a step back. She narrowed her eyes. So there is still something you're hiding. It's not for you. She smiled, then cold and amused. Oh, everything here is for me. I'm the Luna. Don't forget your place. I took a deep breath and untied the pouch. If you touch it, I warned quietly, you'll see what I've lived. And you won't be able to unsee it. She snorted. I don't fear shadows. But shadows didn't have to be feared to burn. She reached out and snatched the pouch from my hand. The moment her fingers closed around it, something shifted. The flame beside us flared. Wind stirred through the open hall where there was no breeze. Her body jerked slightly, just a twitch. And then her eyes widened. I watched her stillness, the way her throat moved when she swallowed. She looked down at the pouch in her hand. Then she screamed. The cloth of her dress where it brushed the flame ignited. Not wildly, not high. Just a slow, creeping burn. A line of fire traced up the edge of her sleeve like it had chosen her on purpose. She dropped the pouch. She beat at her arm. Guards ran forward. Others gasped. The flame was put out quickly, but the scorch mark left behind was impossible to ignore. The silver fabric now blackened, curling at the edges as it had recoiled from something inside her. She turned to me, breathing hard, eyes wide. What did you do? She hissed. Nothing, I said, my voice trembling. You touched what wasn't yours. The Alpha King arrived seconds later, pushing past the others. What happened? She pointed at me. She cursed me. He looked at her dress, then at me. I didn't touch her, I said. She opened the pouch. His eyes dropped to the small cloth on the floor. He crouched and picked it up gently, then looked at me again. Is this the one the Bone Witch gave you? I nodded. He stood slowly and faced the Luna. You opened something that wasn't meant for you, he said. You knew the risks. She's dangerous, she snapped. She should have been banished years ago. No, he said, voice quiet but firm. She should have been protected. Her face twisted, but she said nothing more. She turned and walked away, the pack parting in silence as she passed. I stood still, heart pounding. The Alpha King turned to me. Are you all right? He asked. I nodded slowly. She didn't scare me. Not this time. He studied me. You warned her. She didn't listen. He stepped closer, his voice dropping. What's in the pouch? I hesitated. Truth, I said. Everything I buried. Can I see it? I took the pouch from his hand and untied it slowly. Inside was a single folded piece of aged paper. I opened it. There were no words, only a symbol. An old rune, drawn in deep red. He stared at it. I've seen that, he whispered. In the ruins beneath the old chapel. It's the mark of the red moon, I said. The one I was born under. He looked at me like he saw something new. Not broken. Not weak. But something ancient. Resilient. He reached up and touched my face gently. I should have asked sooner. he said. I wouldn't have told you, I replied. Not then. And now? I met his eyes. I want you to know. All of it. And for once, I didn't feel afraid to be known. Not even by a king. Not even in front of the fire. Chapter 9. He fell silent when my power answered his call. After Luna's dress caught fire, the pack kept their distance. They didn't speak to me directly, but they looked longer, softer, some with curiosity, others with guilt. No one called me cursed anymore, not out loud. And the Alpha King, he stayed close. Not too close, but enough. Enough that I noticed when he lingered near the healer's hut while I worked. Enough that he let his hand brush mine when we passed in the garden. Enough that when I glanced up at the evening feast, he was already watching me. Still, nothing had been said aloud, and a part of me, after everything, was still waiting to be left behind. That part quieted the day the messenger came galloping into the courtyard, mud streaked up his arms and panic on his face. The southern ridge. There's been a breach. Something's coming through the trees. Fast. He didn't have to say more. Rogues, not the kind like the one who had once given me the ribbon. These were wild. Untethered, desperate, the Alpha King stood instantly. Orders came quickly, guards dispatched, scouts sent, the border lit with flame. But I saw something in his face as he turned. A flicker of uncertainty, not fear, but something near it. And for the first time, he looked at me like I might be needed. I stood before he could speak. I'm coming. He hesitated. It could be dangerous. I know. You don't have to, I do. I saw the way his jaw moved, like he was fighting his instinct to protect me. But he nodded. And we rode together toward the ridge. The forest there was dense, the trees tall and close. The ground shook faintly underfoot and the scent in the air wet earth. Blood, fur told us the rogues were close. But there was something else, too. Something wrong. The moment we reached the edge of the border, we saw it. A child, no more than 10 winters, standing in the center of the path, trembling, one of ours. A girl from the northern village. I knew her face. She had wandered too far and now stood frozen as 2 rogue wolves, massive, dark-eyed, snapping with hunger, closed in. No one could reach her in time. The archers couldn't risk the shot. The king's guards stood ready, but a move too fast would spook the rogues, make them strike. That's when I felt it. In my hands. In my chest. A quiet warmth, like the air inside me had turned to something alive. I stepped forward before anyone could stop me. Mira, the Alpha King said sharply. Don't, but I already was. I walked into the clearing slowly, palms open. My breath is steady. The rogues turned toward me, their teeth bared. I didn't flinch. Because the warmth was building now, steady and sure. It spread through my arms, my skin humming. The girl saw me and began to cry. I held up a hand. Stay still, sweetheart. I see you. She did. Then one of the rogues leapt. It should have been the end. But the moment his paws left the ground, something inside me cracked open. The warmth surged outward through my skin, through the air, like a silent wave, golden and soft, but strong enough to still the wind. The rogue stopped mid-air, just stopped, like he hit an invisible wall. He dropped to the ground hard, whimpering. The second one backed away instantly. They weren't hurt, but they were quiet now, like they had seen something they didn't understand and respected it. The girl ran into my arms. I wrapped her in my shawl, my own arms shaking now, not from fear, but from whatever had just come through me. The Alpha King stepped into the clearing, the guards frozen behind him. He didn't speak at first. He just looked at me. His eyes weren't sharp anymore. They were wide, filled with something like awe. I turned to him, my voice soft. I didn't mean to do it. It just happened. He walked slowly toward me, stopping only when we were close enough that I could feel his breath. He touched my arm. Not like before, not gently, not like I was fragile. He held me. Steady, strong. You answered my call, he said, voice rough with feeling. I blinked. What? I felt you before I saw you, he said. When I needed strength, it came through you. I shook my head, still stunned. I didn't know I could do that. He looked down, then lifted my hand to his chest. I think you were made for this. For something all of us forgot existed. The girl still clung to me, and I pressed a hand to her hair, my heart pounding. The rogue wolves had vanished, retreating into the trees. And the guards? They didn't question what they'd seen. Because sometimes the silence left in the wake of power says more than any voice ever could. I looked at the king once more. You're not afraid of me? I whispered. No, he said. I think I've been waiting for you all my life, and for once, I didn't flinch when someone said I was powerful. Because it had come not from anger, but from love. Chapter 10. I bled for the truth they buried in snow. I didn't sleep the night after the clearing. Even after the child was safe, after the rogues had turned and run, after the Alpha King looked at me like he saw something sacred, I couldn't close my eyes. Because something had shifted. In him. In me. And in the bond between us. For the first time, I wasn't just someone who'd survived. I was someone he'd called powerful. Someone he waited for. But with that came something deeper, heavier, a truth I hadn't spoken aloud. The one the witch whispered. The one Luna feared. The one that clawed beneath my skin when the moon rose high and cold. So when the Alpha King came to me the next morning without guards, without his title, I didn't pretend I was fine. He stood quietly at the edge of the healer's garden, his cloak dusted in frost. The sun hadn't broken through yet. The snow that fell overnight hadn't melted. It glittered like silence. He looked unsure for once. He wasn't used to coming to someone without reason, without order. But he came. May I walk with you? He asked. I nodded and stepped away from the herbs. I didn't ask where we were going. I just walked beside him, my shawl wrapped tightly, my fingers hidden in the folds. We passed the edge of the courtyard. The guards bowed their heads. We didn't speak. Then the trees opened. The hills rolled white and endless before us. And I knew. He had brought me here for this. To speak the truth. Out loud. He stopped at a ridge where the snow had drifted high against a broken stone marker. He turned to me. You said once that if I knew everything, I might not care. I didn't answer. He took a breath. I want to know anyway. I looked down at the snow between us. My heart pounded not with fear, but with the ache that comes from hiding too long. I reached for the pouch again. The same one the bone witch gave me. I untied it slowly and unwrapped the rune-marked paper. I showed him. This is the mark from my birth, I said. They said it was a curse. He took it gently, his thumb brushing the paper's edge. It's not a curse, he said. No. I whispered. It's a threat. He looked up. I stepped forward. Because if it's true, if what the witch said is true, then I'm the rightful heir to something they buried. Something they feared would rise again. He said nothing, but I saw it in his eyes, realization. The weight of it. They buried my mother under false charges, I continued, voice steady. They said she betrayed the pack. But she didn't. She was marked too. She carried the old bond, the sacred one. The wind picked up, soft but biting. And they tried to erase me because I was born of her blood, I said. I was the baby she died protecting. He stepped closer. Miravar was left in the snow. Right here. This place. I pointed to the ridge where the stone marker stood, half sunken. I found it weeks ago, I said. I dug beneath it. And I found the pendant she wore. Broken, burned, I reached into my pocket and held it out. He took it, carefully, reverently. The silver was tarnished, the chain thin and twisted. But the same mark, my mark, was carved in the center. This is proof, I whispered. They wanted it forgotten. He stared at it for a long time. Then he said softly, you bled for this, for all of it. Tears stung my eyes. Yes, he looked up at me, his expression no longer soft, now fierce. Protective, and still, you came back. I couldn't leave it buried, I said. Not anymore. His eyes met mine, and something passed between us, something neither of us could name yet. He stepped closer. I believe you. The words were simple. But they broke something open in me, not pain. Relief. He reached up, brushing a tear from my cheek with his thumb. I believe you, he said again. And I won't let them silence you. I touched his hand, held it there for a moment. You don't have to fix me, I said. I don't want saving. He smiled gently. I don't want to save you. I want to stand beside you. Then he took the pendant, unwrapped a strip of cloth from his wrist, and tied it gently around the broken chain. He fastened it around my neck. It was cold at first, then warm, like it belonged there. He looked at me as he stepped back. Let them see it. Let them see you. I stood there, the snow at my feet, the weight of my mother's truth at my throat, and the Alpha King in front of me, no longer just a ruler, but a man choosing to walk through fire with me. And I knew, in that moment, I was no longer the silent girl who healed in the shadows. I was the truth they buried in snow. And I had risen. Chapter 11. The court demanded proof. I gave them. My skin. The sky was still dark when I opened my eyes. His arms were around me, not as a claim, not as a command, but as comfort. My cheek rested against his chest, and I listened to the slow, steady beat of his heart. Warm, alive, still here. We had spoken the truth last night, his truth, mine, and the one between us. He hadn't looked away. Not when I told him how they tried to break me, not when I showed him the pendant they burned, not when I asked if he could still want someone like me. And now, his fingers were curled gently around mine. I didn't move. I didn't want to break the quiet. But outside the cottage, I could hear footsteps. Voices. Tension thickens in the morning air. The court had arrived. They came early, draped in their deep blue cloaks and polished boots, eyes sharp, mouths tight. The elders. The ones who had called me barren. Cursed, a mistake. And they had come to see if the Alpha King had truly lost his mind, or if the rumors were true. He didn't leave my side as we stepped out into the courtyard. I walked beside him, chin up, my shawl wrapped tightly around my shoulders. My mother's pendant hung against my chest, and I felt the cool press of silver like a heartbeat. The elders waited by the stone steps. Elder Mira stood in the center. I see you brought her, she said. He didn't respond. Instead, he stepped forward and said clearly, You called for truth. She's here to give it. The murmurs started. She's unmarked, she's no Luna, she was rejected. He raised a hand. Silence fell. She carries something older than any of your laws, he said. She carries the bond you buried. The elders looked at one another, unsure, unnerved. Elder Mira stepped forward, eyes narrowing. Proof, your majesty. You speak of old bloodlines and forgotten truth. Then let her show it. Let her prove it. He turned to me, his jaw tight. You don't have to, he whispered. But I did. I stepped forward before anyone could speak again. My voice didn't shake. I was born under the winter moon, I said. My mother died giving me breath. They said I carried the curse that took her life. But she was marked. Marked with a bond older than this court. One they feared would rise again. They stared. Cold. Silent. I unwrapped the shawl from my shoulders. I reached for the neckline of my dress and slid it down, baring the skin of my shoulder. Gasps echoed through the courtyard. Because there it was, a mark, pale and raised like scarred silver, shaped like a crescent resting against a flame. It glowed faintly in the early light. The mark of the true Luna bond. The one only passed by blood. I had never shown it before. Not to anyone. The cold touched my skin, but I didn't tremble. I stood still. I let them see. This mark, I said, was carved into me before I could speak. I didn't ask for it. I didn't understand it. But it has never left. And I will not hide it anymore. The elders shifted uncomfortably. Elder Mira's voice was tight. That could have been branded. Faked. Magic can trick the eye. The Alpha King stepped forward, his voice sharp. I saw it burn gold when she healed the child. You saw it too. You just didn't want to name it. She opened her mouth to protest. But he wasn't finished. You called her barren, he said. You left her unclaimed. You whispered shame and lies. But she is the one who felt the bond before I did. She is the one who remembered what you made us forget. He turned to me again. His voice softened. And she is the one I choose. Not in secret, not in silence, but now. Before all of you. I blinked, and he reached out slowly, openly, and took my hand. I looked down at our fingers. His thumb brushed gently over my skin. Not rushed, not forced, just there, steady. I want you beside me, he said. Not because of what you carry, but because of who you are. My throat felt tight. I searched his eyes. I needed to be sure. I was never meant to be Luna, I whispered. I was meant to disappear. He smiled softly. And yet you stayed. I nodded once. Then I turned back to the elders. I gave you my truth, I said, and I gave it bare. Not to beg. Not to prove my worth. But because I am done hiding my skin like it's a sin. The courtyard was silent. Even Elder Mira had no more words. Only then did I feel the bond settle fully into place. Not magic. Not fire. But calm. Like a thread finally tied. He squeezed my hand gently. I leaned into him just a little, and for the first time, I didn't feel smaller standing beside a king. I felt chosen. Not for what I could give, but for everything they tried to take. The wind lifted the edge of my shawl. The mark glowed against my skin, and I let it. I let them see. Because I was no longer afraid. And I would never cover my truth again. Chapter 12. My scars crowned me before the moon could speak. The wind was soft that night, carrying the scent of pine and peace. I stood on the edge of the cliff where the pack had once gathered to mock me. Now, they gathered in silence. Not out of fear, out of respect. My shawl fluttered behind me, no longer a tattered piece of forgotten cloth, but a symbol of everything I had carried and survived. My scars, those that once marked me as damaged, were no longer hidden. I wore a sleeveless white dress. My arms were bare. My shoulders, once curled in shame, stood straight. The marks were visible. Every one of them. Cain stood a few steps behind me. The Alpha King. My mate. My choice. He hadn't spoken yet. Not since we walked from the den to this place where the moon would witness the crowning of a Luna. But I felt him. His presence behind me was warm. Anchoring, a small sound made me turn. The healer from the East Amira approached with the ceremonial Luna pendant. It glimmered with a blue stone set in silver. But before she could lift it, I raised my hand gently. Wait! Everyone's breath seemed to pause. I turned to Cain, my heart thudding not with fear, but with the gravity of truth. I don't want to be crowned because I'm yours, I said softly. I want to be crowned because I survived. Because I rose. Because I healed. His eyes, those storm-dark eyes that once looked through me, now softened. You're right, he said, stepping closer. You were always enough, even before I knew you were mine. I took his hand. My fingers trembled, not from doubt, but because I could finally feel everything. The day they named another Luna, I whispered, I stood barefoot in the snow, invisible. Tonight I stand scarred. And seen. Cain nodded. Say it, he said. Say the words you once buried. Let them witness your voice. I faced the pack. I was rejected. I was ashamed. I was hidden away. But my scars do not make me weak. They make me real. They make me the Luna you never saw coming. There was no applause, just stillness. And then, one by one, heads bowed not in forced submission, but quiet acceptance. Amira stepped forward again. May I? I nodded this time. The pendant was placed around my neck. It settled against my chest like it had always belonged there. Cain moved beside me and took both my hands in his. His thumbs brushed the inside of my wrists, where the oldest scars lived. Do they still hurt? He asked. No, I said. They remember, but they don't ache. He kissed my forehead. It wasn't the mark of dominance, it was a vow. Gentle, lasting, then he leaned closer, his voice low enough for just me. The moon chose you before I did. I'm just lucky I got to follow. Tears filled my eyes, but I didn't blink them away. I wanted to feel all of it. Behind us, the sky shifted. The full moon broke through the clouds, casting a silver path across the earth. The light touched my face, my scars, my mate's hand in mine. You should say something, Cain whispered. I looked up at the sky, then down at the people who had once seen me as less. I won't lead with power, I said. I'll lead with memory, with kindness, with strength carved from pain. And with that, it was done. Not with a roar, not with a crown of gold, but with silence that felt whole. Cain and I turned to walk back to the den, but halfway down the path, he paused. I have something for you, he said. I raised an eyebrow. Another pendant? He chuckled softly. No, it's something older. From before we knew each other. He pulled a small carved charm from his pocket. A simple wooden moon, darkened by time. I carved this when I was 15. Before I was alpha. I never knew why, but I always kept it. I think it was waiting for you. He tied it to the silver chain around my neck. The old and new, side by side. We kept walking, and though the night was quiet, my heart spoke clearly. I was once their mistake. Now, I'm their miracle. And my scars? They crowned me before the moon ever could.